And away we go. It's another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show. My name is Pete Sweeney. I'm the editor-in-chief of arrowheadpride.com, joined once again by my esteemed deputy editor, John Dixon. John, can you believe that Ryan Reynolds watched the Chief game last night?
Yeah, that was a weird deal. And I assume that's just because they were in New York. You know, if they'd been playing the game in Los Angeles, maybe the same thing might have happened with some Hollywood folks or whatever. I assume that's what it was. Or are we going to see this starting to happen at Arrowhead now? As long as as Trailer is a thing. Yeah, I don't know.
I know that she has a tour coming up. And so I don't know how many more games she can go to. I don't know the details of the tour. I just know it's coming up. I guess this is now part of my job, so I'll have to do some research on that after we get out. We will know the level of her commitment once we see whether or not she's in Minnesota, John. I think that'll really tell us if this is going to be an every single game thing. But yes, the celebrities were out as to be expected. As John mentioned, it was a 23-20 win for the Chiefs in New York. I know that there's a lot of degenerate Chiefs fans out there today that are happy with the win, but not so happy with their quarterback sliding ahead of the goal line and not having the Chiefs cover last night. A little bit scarier than I thought. Everybody really felt, including myself, going into it, and just goes to show that you never know when you're going to get someone's best performance. We'll talk about that as we go here on the AP Editor Show. First, we'll go to the Andy Reid press conference. He had his usual Monday press conference with the media that took place about an hour ago now. We'll go over the main quotes from that. We'll have our world-famous Marinated takeaways from Sunday Night Football. A little bit of a news roundup heading into what is Vikings week. John will give us some of his initial snap count takeaways, and we'll check out the opening odds for Chiefs and Vikings. Remember, last week during the opening odds segment, I said the Chiefs would cover for sure, and that was obviously incorrect. All right. Before we get into anything, though, John, we do have one review this week, which we appreciate. If you leave a review on Apple iTunes, I will read it here on the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show. I will be honest, Brad Simcox's imitation of a Swiftie on the recent Great British Chief Show is the reason I'm writing this review. I'd been meaning to leave one for a long time now, but that put me over the edge and had me dying of laughter. The boys from the Kingdom are top-notch. I've been a long-time listener and fan. This podcast network is simply the best. For entertainment purposes, the Great British Chief Show is my favorite, but when it comes to analysis, I look forward to the Editor's Show the most. Huge shout-out to Serta for all of his hard work, all-around great cast of characters and content. Yeah, for the diehard Chiefs fans, I don't know if Serta gets enough credit. I mean, he just pumps this channel with content. We try to come up with new ideas. I know we did the Arrowhead Drive last year. We've changed that to the Arrowhead Pride Report this year because I feel like we can get more information from the ground out to you guys, but he takes care of everything. So shout out to Steve and shout out to Brad, John, on his Swiftie impression.
Who knew that we would have to do that this year, that anybody would need to do a Swiftie impression?
You never know. As you know, John, I am a guilty pleasure wrestling fan, and they used to say something when I was growing up, and that's, you never know what will happen in the World Wrestling Federation. And now you can say that about the National Football League. Not only was Taylor at the game last night again, but I did see a lot of unhappy fans, not just Jets fans, but NFL fans across the league wide, because they changed the Instagram account to say Chiefs as Swifties are 2-0, and they have Taylor Swift as the background for the NFL Twitter. And if you think some folks are sick of it in Kansas City, you can only imagine the other 31 NFL cities. So we will see if the NFL starting now proceeds with caution from a social media standpoint. But
I was really surprised how much NBC leaned into it to begin the game.
Yeah, I think Harold Kuntz of I believe he's Fox 4. He had a running tally going, and he would tweet it, and I think it ended up at 17 shots of Taylor Swift by the end of the evening.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, the league's really into – look, when when the league sees an opportunity for new fans, which means more merch, more tickets, more
Sure.
viewers,
Yeah.
they're going to lean in, and that is an untapped fan base that now exists. The Chiefs Swifty crossover. Okay, we've said Swifty enough times, I think, already here at the 5-minute mark. All right, let's go back to the Andy Reid press conference. John just got off the Zoom with him about an hour ago. It's about 1:00 on a Monday here. And you can listen to the full thing. We were complimenting Steve, but he puts all these press conferences on from the podium. I asked Andy Reid about what happened in this game, because it really was the tale of two different games. So I was curious as to, hey, was it more so something the Jets did, or more self-inflicted? My feel, and you're about to hear the quote, is that Andy Reid felt that it was more self-inflicted. Here is the head coach.
Yeah, you know what, Pete, we did. We got jumped out and we were moving, and then we got backed up there, and that's where the problem started. Then field position kind of changed. The turnovers took place, and we gave them an opportunity, and that's what they needed. I mean, we let that old saying is, you let them up when they're down. So we did that, and we knew going in that you couldn't turn the ball over. We knew that, and then that happened, and then we had to kind of regain ourselves, and that's a hard thing to do in the National Football League, is kind of regain it from that position. So when you're up, down, now you got to get back up again. In the second half, they came out, they scored with the first possession, and then I thought our defense just put the hammer down there, even with a couple of times not great field position. So, but they just that kind of recharged everything. And then Pacheco and some of his runs, and then Pat had a couple of nice throws in there, and the old line got rolling, and it got out of the little funk that we had going. And so it finished up good. Hard place to play and hard way to win a game, but you've got to be able to do that, and we were able to do it. We just need to get rid of the other stuff in between, and we'll be better off.
Kind of sounds like to me that he thought this was a self-inflicted type of game. Mistakes, some of those penalties, right? And then also, and it happens in the NFL. Remember, everyone gets paid here. A little bit of quicksand. I think you sometimes see that in the NFL. And to be in the muck and to be in the quicksand, not good against a team that has one win like the New York Jets. But to Andy's point, especially when you're on the road and a team is coming back, it is very hard to stop that bleeding. And granted, again, it's the New York Jets, but kudos to the Chiefs for doing that. A lot of teams in that spot having given up a 20-point lead. You also saw it with the LA and Indianapolis yesterday, and able to reverse the course, I thought was impressive and should be noted, even despite what is a total disappointing night largely in New York.
Yeah, it was hard to watch there for a little while. And of course, at the beginning, it felt so wonderful. It's like, oh boy, here we go. It's going to be another ride like last week.
Yeah.
And it was just startling how quickly that was turned on its head. And frankly, that first drive of the third quarter was terrible to watch. I mean, I really felt at that point, oh my gosh, the Chiefs are going down. And then, just like Andy said, I mean, he had this exactly right. Then the defense stiffened up. I think they traded 4 punts after they tied up the game. And that's both defensive, of course, keeping the other team from scoring. So that's when the game got interesting, and it became a question of who was going to score next and who was going to score last. And it turned out it was the same score.
Yeah, and the thing that none of us had predicting, I mean, we all rightfully, I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah,
but
sure.
We all went, going back into this game, we all said there's no way, 0.0000% chance that Zach Wilson outplays Patrick Mahomes, and he did, and he had a better night. How many times has that happened? Probably 1 out of 100, but you got the one last night, and kudos to the Chiefs defense for stopping that bleeding, because everything was about how it wasn't Aaron Rodgers, and Wilson made some Rodgers-esque plays. Now, if Rodgers was playing this game, the Chiefs probably lose, let's be honest. But he did enough have the team in it. And kudos to the Chiefs defense for stopping everything while the offense had to like recalibrate, so to speak, I think.
Yeah, maybe Rodgers would have made the difference, or maybe he wouldn't have. Maybe the Chiefs would have planned it differently if Rodgers is playing. That's one of the problems with making that kind of a statement, is that you don't know how that would have affected everything else if Rodgers had been playing for the Jets. But your point is correct that with just a little bit more juice on their side, the Jets could have won the game. The question is whether or not the Chiefs would have been prepared for something else if Rodgers had been available.
Yeah, and the final score too is a little bit misleading because it should have. I was joking about the betting thing, but it could have easily been 30-20, which is a different looking game and score. Speaking of Patrick Mahomes last night really owned up to how dumb the interceptions were, and essentially said that he was greedy. Andy Reid was asked about that comment earlier today.
He knows better than anybody when that happens, and he came up afterwards and just said, "Hey, listen, I gotta check it down there, or run it," and did that a little bit more in the second half. Yeah, well, you could kind of see the evolution of it during the game. He had a nice one to Noah where he kind of lofted it up and over, and he tried the second one and was picked, and then the next one was picked, but he was trying to put it in a hole. He's done that so many different times, but they were settling back, so better to just work the flat there or run.
Yeah, and before we comment on it, there was a follow-up that just asked Andy Reid about how hard it is for a guy who's struggling like that to just continue firing down the field.
Well, no one knows better than what the player does when they do something bad. I mean, if they're competitive, they feel more than anybody. My point is, you do what got you there, and that's attacking. If you need to check it down as part of the attack, check it down. I mean, they're settling deep. Just check it down and keep firing, keep going. A lot of game left to play, and so he's positive that way. He knows all of that. He'll normally say something to me before I say something to him. So I think you've got to keep firing.
I think even a player like Patrick Mahomes, who is the greatest player, through his duration of his career to this point, man, he's going to have a bad night. And I noted this in the rapid reaction. It's something to say, okay, I was having a great first quarter. I'm now off. And the Jets are showing me these looks that they are not letting me throw the ball down the field anymore. So you know what? And he's got this old man fast thing going on where he's like sneaky fast, but he said, I'm going to just take the ball in my hands, and rather than throwing another pick, because I just maybe don't have my juice tonight, I'm going to go run and win the game. And the great ones really find a way to win. He also, in addition to saying that he was maybe a little too greedy last night, I thought it was telling and right, where he's like, you're not always going to win pretty. To win Super Bowls, you got to win ugly. And man, you're not going to play well. And those are the great teams, man. And those are the great players. The ones that don't play well, kind of know they're not playing well, and then do anything else in their power to get the W. And I think Mahomes deserves some credit for that, even if he did play poorly.
Yeah, it strikes me listening to Andy talk there and referencing what Mahomes was saying last night. We know so much about Mahomes and his ability to, have a photographic memory about these things.
Right.
Andy Reid always says, and his quarterback coaches have always said, that he learns things and he doesn't have to learn them again. But it just shows you how varied NFL defenses can be, that they can still find ways to trip him up and show him something that he hasn't seen before. And part of that's because they get paid too. And they're also smart guys. And they've got, a whole week or two to think about it, and figure out some way to get Patrick Mahomes going the wrong way. Yeah. And sometimes they can do it. And sometimes it's about Mahomes as well. I mean, I'm not saying he's incapable of having an off day. He is capable of having an off day. But I think that sometimes the defensive coordinators have something to do with it too.
Yeah, I was checking out the next gen stats today, and again, I haven't dived into the film, or I know that Ron Kopp and the team will get on that and see kind of what was happening here. But Mahomes was actually okay up to the 15-yard line. Beyond the 15, he had one incomplete pass or two incomplete passes, and those were the two picks. But to Andy's point, the pass to Noah Gray was beyond that mark. So I think he saw some success early and just thought he would be able to get it again. And that's when you saw those mistakes.
Yeah.
And good to reverse the fortune late in the game and find a way to run out the clock. That was another question to Andy Reid, just about the 4-minute offense and how in these tough games this year, and I think they've struggled with this in the past, if memory serves me correctly, but they've just been able to ice these games even with X amount on the clock. And I think that's what you saw in Jacksonville, as well. And this is a sort of a new development for the Chiefs. And here was Andy Reid's comments on that.
I think we do work on it quite a bit. You see it at training camp, and then we work on it every week on Friday. So, and we've done that in the past too. So that's not something that's new. But, the guys up front are blocking nice. Coach X got some good runs there that he's put together. And then Pacheco, and really all three of them, Pacheco, 25-1, they're all running hard and good. They're seeing things. So it's been a positive thing, that combination. And you probably include the tight ends on that because they're in on a lot of those.
And it's good to get these reps now, maybe against inferior teams, because I think when you get to, and I know the Dolphins didn't have the greatest day yesterday, but like the Dolphins or even the Chargers, who are starting to come on now, certainly the Eagles and teams like the Bills, who knows where the Bengals are, but especially in those big games, you're going to want to have those reps of, okay, we're leading by 4 points. Let's make sure, even with 5 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock, Josh Allen never touches the ball again. And I just think in the past, sometimes the Chiefs enjoyed, or not really enjoyed, but have forced themselves to play with fire a little bit more. And I think these are positive signs. And you hear that from Andy Reid. He's really like the way that the running backs have been taking. Isaiah Pacheco might have had his best game last night too. And especially toward the end, just making sure that the game was grinded out. So that's a nice development, John.
Yeah, we know that Pacheco is ready to play because he played a lot more snaps. Well, not a lot more, but more snaps than he typically has played in Chiefs games. So that tells you that the team believes he's ready to go and be productive. But I think everybody could see that on that 48-yard run in the first quarter. My goodness. That was incredible to watch. There was a guy who was determined that he was going to make it to the end zone on that play. You love that. You love to see the guy run like that. You love to see the blocking come together like that, as Ron Kopp broke down in his Insta breakdown last night. The Chiefs actually went to a lot of trouble for that play to break open, and it worked. And Pacheco got the most out of it. It was quite a thing to watch.
Yeah, and I'll just use it here. This was one of my marinated takeaways, but it's making me ask the question, like, should Isaiah Pacheco be a bell cow, and should the Chiefs be even flirting with this committee? And I'm not saying suddenly cut Jerick McKinnon or try to flip Clyde. I know that's been a dream of Chiefs fans for a while now. I think you keep them on the team, but the way that he played last night, it just makes you think he should be getting 15 carries a game. I mean, he is that explosive, that good. I think the offensive line was really setting him up, and they were going left side, right side. They really mixed it up as far as how they were using Isaiah Pacheco. And by extension of that, can we get the best hypnotist in Kansas City to sit down Isaiah and say, Arrowhead Stadium is in New Jersey. Arrowhead Stadium is in New Jersey. Arrowhead Stadium is in New Jersey. Because I think we were at a point where you have Pacheco, and I think if any of us were asked, okay, on a 1 to 10 scale, how hard does Isaiah Pacheco run? We would have already said 10, right? But there was an 11 in Jersey last night. I don't know if it was being home. I don't know if it was being in front of college friends and family, but he just had another level. And I would go as far as to say, even from a running back standpoint, and this is something that I pay attention to. I know Steve does behind the scenes here. He looked like one of the best running backs in the NFL last night. And I you can get some of that energy on a week by week basis, I think that would be good. But I think that is aided by the idea of, well, we actually have to give him like more than 3 carries in the first half for him to tap into that. I don't think it's just going to happen necessarily always on one of the opening carries of the game. The Chiefs, to their credit, leaned into that, I think, as the game went on. But it begs the question, and just because we were talking about Isaiah, I figured I'd burn one of my marinated takeaways, and that is it. Should the Chiefs be going more so into bell cow mode as opposed to like constantly mixing and matching there?
Well, the point I would make, and I will dig into what I was going to mention about the snap counts a little later in the show now. We'll go ahead and give a preview of that section.
Yeah.
In a sense, they've already done so. He was on the field for 64% of the snaps, the offensive snaps on Sunday night. That's a higher percentage than he's seen in any game since he became a Chief, and significantly higher than most of his games. There were a couple of games where he was in the mid 50s, but he's never been above 60, and most games he's down below 50% during 2022. So in a way, you could say that the Chiefs are already flirting with making him the bell cow. Another thing that's different about Pacheco this year, no special teams snaps. And that was the case last year,
Right.
that he was being used as a returner, which meant that they couldn't really devote that many extra snaps to him. But, looking at what he did on Sunday night, we may be at the point where the Chiefs are doing exactly as you suggest,
Right.
and leaning a little more towards a bell cow running back. I don't think Andy Reid is ever going to go completely there. I just don't think that's in his DNA. But I think it's possible he could lean that way a little more, and I think that would be a good thing with Pacheco as the guy.
From a talent standpoint, it feels like it's the first time they've had even a candidate for that since maybe Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
So I think that plays into it too. You can understand. No offense to these guys because they were great, but you can understand why they didn't want to do that with Spencer Ware and Kendrick West post Jamal Charles. But this is kind of a different story. So we'll see which way the Chiefs go. We have more marinated takeaways coming up after the break. This is the Arrowhead Pride Editor's Show. Back in the Arrowhead Pride Editor's Show, you know what time it is. You've been waiting all week for it. It's those world famous marinated takeaways. Gave you a little appetizer on the backside of the break right there. So we're going to start with John here, as we always do. John, as you've, I don't know, these are not even that marinated, like, because what is it?
Yeah.
It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The game just ended 12 hours ago. This is like when you put the steak on too early and you needed to marinate it for an extra day. But we're gonna
like a basted
yeah,
takeaway.
it's like, a little juice on it. It's not as good as the usual marination. We're gonna try our best anyway. So what is your first
on there?
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes style. What is your first takeaway from Sunday Night Football?
Well, this is actually kind of a repeat. I believe it was the Jaguars game, I think, as you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, where we saw a similar sequence in the game. But that final drive that the Chiefs had was amazing. And again, I wrote it down in one of the pieces that I put on the site last night, and I'll just share it again. A Chiefs drive that included Mahomes converting a 3rd and 22 after a penalty with a 25-yard scramble, a 3rd and 20 play that was converted by a defensive holding penalty that also wiped out another Mahomes interception, and a 3rd and 1 that was converted when Kelsey took a direct snap and handed it off to Jerick McKinnon. Are you kidding me? One of those plays actually worked. And then, not only did they, they got the ball at, I believe it was the 47-yard line. The drive gained 45 yards in 15 plays.
Yeah.
And took 7.5 minutes off the clock. It was astonishing that the Chiefs were able to drag that out for such a long time. It was almost as if they intended to be in those 3rd down situations so they could take more time off the clock, because when they got down to the point that Mahomes could slide at the 2 and kneel down for a couple of plays, it's almost like they planned it that way.
I don't know if I muted correctly during my cough fit there, but I apologize if I didn't. Yeah, I was trying to mention there that I I completely agree, and I think for so long, and granted, there's going to be exception games. So if you're thinking of one, don't kill me here. But I think just for so long, it's like we can either score fast or we're not going to be able to do one of these methodical drives where we can
Mm-hmm.
really be smart. And it's tough. I'm not saying it's just
Right.
like an easy
Right.
thing to do. Like, hey, you're only going to get a certain amount of yardage, nickel and dime, so you can just bleed the clock. So I just think it's a very good development. I think that's a good thing to note. And Mahomes is just really, really good about that. And he joked in the press conference after about if I can just get to the point where they start to spy me, have a quarterback
Yeah.
spy like you see with some of these other teams, certainly Lamar Jackson comes to mind of someone that you would
Yeah.
always have to have a spy. Justin Fields, who the Chiefs just played. I think it might happen because especially late in the game, if you don't look at the film and say, well, we can have everybody covered, but Patrick, especially with the game on the line, it's always seemingly these big moments where he scrambles. It's not something he really wants to lean into at the beginning of the game. Not impossible to see it at the beginning of the game, but I think at a certain point, if you're these opposing defenses, you got to be like, well, he's going to run. He's definitely going to run. The game's on the line. This is what he does, and so maybe not a full game spy for Pat, but maybe one of these. It's game time situation. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
He's more apt to run in these situations. Let's spy him in the fourth quarter.
Maybe 3rd and 20, a 3rd and
Yeah.
20 spy. And,
Right.
those situations happen pretty frequently in Chiefs games. We know because he keeps converting the damn things somehow.
All right. My next marinated takeaway. Not everyone's going to love this one. I don't care. You're listening to me anyway, so you like me enough. I just think the complaining about the referee, and this isn't just Jets fans because it is a mess right now, but Chiefs fans during the game complaining about the referees. Listen to me. Stop doing it. It is such a loser thing to do. The game is 60 minutes long. 60. You have a million plays. If you play better than the other team, it shouldn't matter what the refs say. And I tweeted this because I'm seeing the Jets fans are like nauseating today about how it should have been a hold and the defensive holding was only called after the interception. Man, don't let your quarterback fumble the key snap of the game and give the ball back to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And then Chiefs fans, look, you're a Chiefs fan. You're listening to this podcast. I know I'm talking to air about Jets fans. If there is a phantom horse collar call or a questionable safety, you're still winning 17-2. Play defense, get the ball back and score again. Like even if the Jets had somehow won in a miracle, I would have said today, you know what? It wasn't the referee calling a horse collar that extended the game. It was two of the worst throws I've ever seen Patrick Mahomes make.
Right.
That is the game. And so and I know not everyone does it, so I'm not talking to everybody, but if you woke up today and you're getting into a spat on Twitter X or whatever about the referee, look, the refereeing was bad throughout the game. Jets fans should relax, and Chiefs fans during the game should relax. Like, you're playing the Jets, right? This is a one-win team. They are not going to the playoffs. Win the game. You get 2 bad calls against you, win the game. And then same thing for the Jets. You want to pull off this magical upset, maybe just hand the football off correctly. And that is my rant. I know it was ranty. You're playing a New York team, so I had to give you a dose of the New York thing. But I get so annoyed by the referee complaints, John, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, first, let me give you a thumbs up there on Twitter X. I love that. I love that Twitter X. I'll have to make a note of that one there.
And a little mini rant here. I was complaining last night that they didn't change it to like a word. Why change it to a letter? Even if it was a word, a new word that we had to learn. It's just hard to say. It isn't a cool thing to say. Anyway, that's my second mini rant. So you got 2 for the price of 1 there.
Yeah, you can't really say I just X'd somebody a little while ago.
It is the worst name change. Worse than the Commanders. I loved Washington football team, and this is now worse than the Commander change. Anyway, go ahead, John.
Well, I couldn't agree more with you, Pete. I mean, it's frustrating, of course, when a penalty goes the wrong way. Let's just start with that. Of course it is. Of course, we would like to see the penalties called correctly in our eyes every time. But guess what? That's not going to happen.
No, it doesn't.
And, if you're a professional football player, the only thing you can do is get past it. And play better from that point on to get past whatever disadvantage the penalty gave you. Right. You don't get a lot of opportunity to do that if it happens in the last seconds of the game, but that's just the way it goes. Like Joe Montana said, sometimes, the ball is shaped weird and it
Well,
bounces funny,
and then if you're the Jets, don't give up 17 points in 3
Yeah.
seconds, right? Like,
Yeah,
and then maybe you wouldn't have
exactly.
had to
Yeah.
worry about the referees at the end of the game. And then the
Yeah.
same thing for the Chiefs. If God forbid the horse collar would have led to a Jets miracle comeback, you made a lot of bad plays. You made a lot of mistakes. It would have been the same thing the other side. So I'm not even just picking on Jets fans. Anyway, that's it. I can't talk more about it. John, what's your next one?
Well, we always talk about how teams will have the Chiefs targeted when they look at the schedule. And I think that boils down to individual players as well. And I thought of this today when I saw someone mention that Zach Wilson had played the game of his life. And I thought, as often happens in a situation like this, I thought, I wonder if he really did play the game of his life. Well, as it turns out, he did.
Yeah.
His passer rating last
Okay.
night was 105 something. It's one of only 2 games he's ever played with a passer rating above 100. The other one was last year's game against the Bills that the Jets won. So, even as I always say, even the stupidest guy in the room is worth listening to because once in a while he's going to say something valuable. I always say that to people. And the same's true of an NFL player. Even the worst NFL player is capable of making a great play once in a while. Even the worst NFL quarterback is capable of having a great game once in a while. And we saw that on Sunday night with Zach Wilson because he was facing the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and this goes into the film and just trying to pay attention because I think around the NFL, if people stopped watching Sunday Night Football and after that Carson Daly intro, and if you weren't a fan of the Chiefs or the Jets, maybe I would have turned the game off too. And you simply see the score and you see the stats and you're just like, wow, the Chiefs defense sucks. And it's just, you shouldn't make those assumptions because Zach Wilson played out of his mind. And that goes into my final marinated takeaway. There's a point of the game in the middle of it where the Jets decided to really pick on the second level of the Chiefs, any linebacker in coverage they were targeting. But it wasn't even necessarily bad coverage by the linebackers. I saw that Brandon Kiley also noted this on Twitter X, and it was something that I was thinking. Just the idea of like the linebackers were actually playing pretty good coverage. It's just Zach Wilson was putting it on the money. That throw against Brandon, not Brandon. I got Brandon on the mind. Brian, the throw against Brian Cook was just magnificent. And so you look quick, you're at the bar with your buddies at your phone and you're just like, wow, Zach Wilson's got 2 touchdowns against the Chiefs in a tie game. The Chiefs must actually suck. It's like, no, actually, Zach Wilson flashed. And I don't think you see a lot of the Chiefs players complimenting him after the game for no reason there. I think he had a moment, and it's a good development for him. I felt awfully bad for him because I think he was bracing himself for that Mahomes 17 year where he's going to really get to learn behind a pro Aaron Rodgers, take a step back, reset, suddenly thrown into the fire again. And it seems like New York wants to see what they have with him as far as development goes, and indicate, we're predicting the future here, but indications are now that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back. He's not going to end like that. So maybe Wilson's looking at 25, but I don't know. You saw a little bit of why he was a top pick in the draft. I'm not ready to just say like, okay, the Jets ended up making the right call there necessarily, but I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people in Kansas City are going to be upset with how the defense played against him last night. And I just think sometimes, even against the worst quarterbacks in the league, like you got to tip your cap because they can play, they can have great moments too. And Wilson isn't great, but like I'll tell you, in watching the one good thing about covering Sunday Night, John, is I can watch a full day of football. Man, Zach Wilson looks better than Desmond Ridder looks way better than Kenny Pickett. And I think there was a part of the year where you would have said, I don't want Wilson over anybody. And so I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. But the coverage was not as bad as the box score would tell you last night. And bleeds into another takeaway. It's just another solid game, I thought, from Drew Tranquil, who is filling in for Nick Bolton. The Chiefs are awfully deep defensively, and deeper marinated takeaway. So now we're getting into the getting away from
Here
the
we go.
basting.
Yep. Pass the ketchup now.
Yeah, another day closer to Charles Menahue back, which is
Yeah.
going to be a relief of pressure off of a lot of shoulders, and quite the midseason addition. When you have to play 6 games, it almost feels like a trade, and they're going to be adding a big time piece come week 7 with the defense that I think is still playing pretty well here. So I started with one surface level marinated takeaway. We got a little bit deeper into the turkey, and then we loaded it with stuffing with the Menahue point there, John. So go ahead.
Yeah. I have one more thought from the game, and it kind of goes back to something that you said before, but I want to expand on it a little bit. We see safeties so rarely, we kind of lose track of how significant they are. But they really are. It seems like almost an afterthought because it's 2 points. 2 points. What does that get you?
Right.
Well, 2 points can get you a lot in a close football game. And more importantly, not only does the other team score the 2 points, they get the ball.
Mm.
And, after you had the momentum of getting a quarterback sack, or in the case of this particular safety, a penalty in the end zone because you're in this case, because your defensive player was beating the offensive tackle.
Yes.
I mean, penalties don't happen in a vacuum,
Sure.
After you've sacked an opposing quarterback in the end zone, that's a big, big play that will almost always give that team momentum. And then they get the ball right away. Now, it's not unusual then for there to be a touchdown immediately following that 2-point play. So it can be a 9-point swing pretty quickly. In this case, it was only 5 points, but it clearly kicked off a turnaround. And I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind whenever you see a safety happen, that it's a much bigger play than people really give it credit for.
Yeah, I'm not happy because I made this bold prediction that Jawan Taylor was not going to take any penalties, and he got called for a huge penalty and then holding later in the game.
Yeah.
I guess my energy from that was that he wasn't going to get called for any illegal formation penalties or
Which
false
he
start.
wasn't. Yeah.
And he wasn't. So
Yeah.
I guess I get that going from here, which is nice.
And I think it's worth noting too that Trey Smith was called for holding twice in last night's game, but nobody was paying attention to Trey Smith,
Right.
and so there's not a big thing about, Trey Smith was a disaster last night, but he had just as many penalties as Jawan Taylor did. So,
there's little hiding in the NFL, but the Chiefs need a game where they're hidden. And why not a week? when you're going at the same time as Eagles Rams, when you're going at the same time as Cowboys 49ers, so these 2 games will have all the attention next week, where the Chiefs will just be hiding in plain sight, for Chiefs fans' sake, hopefully taking care of Kirk Cousins trying to deliver the 4th loss of the season. Chiefs have looked better than the Vikings, so this should be a game where, again, I've said it a couple times this year, if you play clean football, you're probably beating the inferior team. When you don't, you might get beat by the inferior team, which is what we almost saw.
Or you might win by a field goal.
Or you might win by a field goal at the end.
Yeah.
But that's it for the Marinated takeaways from Sunday Night Football. When we get back right here on the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show, we'll go over some of the news items to lock in on as we approach Vikings week. This is the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show. Back here on the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show, we are rounding third, John. By the way, the baseball season is over, so we're rounding third on the Editor Show. Nick Bolton, he missed his 2nd straight game, so we will see if he participates in practice this week. I tend to think this is the week he's back, at least limitedly. The Chiefs would have probably put him on IR for me. This is what I think if it was more serious.
Yeah.
So look for his return to the practice field on Wednesday. Prince Tegoinogo, John, your boy, torn quad, so we'll have to see him potentially next year. This is tough because he was teetering along the roster line heading into this season, so you wonder if he can rebound and make a case next year. The problem when you're a bubble player and you're carving out a role here and there, remember the Chiefs were having him active over Lucas Niang, is when you're a bubble player, you kind of have to stay on the field. And like Nick Allegretti has, he's been able to have a nice backup role in Kansas City for a couple of years now. problem when you run into this situation is you get a whole batch of new players next year. You get 10 draft picks. You get X amount of free agents. That's another thing. I can't say X without it being the social media. X amount of free agents in there. So we'll see. I don't think the story is necessarily over for Prince in the NFL. I wonder about Kansas City, though, and you always do. Jalen Watson was out for this game. Seems minor precaution here. It sounds like he injured his shoulder or maybe re-aggravated in practice. And so we'll see. We'll be looking at those statuses heading into this game. The good thing about Sunday night, John, is it seemed like the Chiefs came out with no additional injuries, which is always a big win.
Well, let's hope that's true, because sometimes that's what we think on Monday, and then on Wednesday we have an injury report with 6 new guys on it, which is sort of what happened last week. I seem to remember there wasn't that much that Andy talked about on Monday, and then we had this long injury list on Wednesday when the practice started. So,
it's a good point, because Nick Bolton came out of that game okay, and now he's missed 2 games in a row. So it was a little curious.
But that also is an indicator that it's probably not serious, because you're right. If it was serious, they would have put him on IR, since they can take him back off of there after 4 games. So I think that the odds are he'll be back in the next week or two, or the Chiefs were just wrong about it. We'll just have to see how it plays out, as Andy.
It's rare that it is rare. It has happened before. I remember with McCole Hardman initially. Remember they didn't put him on IR, and then they did.
Yeah,
I think that was last year. But more times than not, they have a pretty good grasp of these timetables. So that's why I think you see Bolton back in the mix. And 2 good games for Drew Tranquill. I mean, I'm not saying that he performed exactly how Bolton might have. He of course is the backup in that role, but a nice patch-up job. You get the wins, and that's all that matters. The Chiefs don't care about those spreads. We talked about Jawan Taylor. Jawan Taylor took accountability, which I thought was good, because when you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid defending you, I think at that point it becomes very easy for you to be like, yeah, they're right. I am getting picked on. F this. I'm just gonna S on the refs too. A lot of curses with letters right there. But he didn't. I mean, he, talking to him in the locker room, he's just like, I have a lot to work on, and I'm working on the alignment. I'm working on the timing, and right attitude to have. And again, I know that he ended up having a costly face mask. Who knows if it should have been a safety or not, and then the hold. But the problems were the illegal formations and the false starts. So I thought that was a good development, John, as well.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I agree. And let's be realistic here. If you're going to go over the line with a penalty, that's the place you want to do it. The refs may not see you do it, and in the meantime, you're keeping your quarterback from being sacked in the end zone for 2 points. You understand why players are working so much harder to protect the quarterback in that situation, and that's when these penalties happen. You don't just get held right off the bat at the snap. You get held because the defender, because you're about to get around the offensive tackle or the offensive guard, and so they figure out some way to hang on to you. That's what a holding penalty is. And so we really shouldn't be surprised that it happens on a play at the goal like that. We don't want it to, of course, but I think it's wrong to just say, to jump all over Jawan Taylor for this, because, his first job is to protect Patrick Mahomes, and the other guy is going to be coming a lot harder when your guy is taking a snap and dropping back into the end zone.
Yeah, I'm with you. Needs to still be better, and I think he's improving.
Sure.
He was a big ticket free agent. I think it was a good step in the right direction to avoid the other 2 specific penalties. And so again, we'll see how we can build on that when the Chiefs aren't the marquee game for once in a certain week here. Montreal, Washington. I think this has been a nice development for the Chiefs, and nothing against Montreal Washington's wide receiver ability, but I think it's nice to have a return specialist, not to shout back out to the days of Tyreek Hill and and his problems with Jalen Ramsey going up against him. But I think with a player that is just very specifically going to be your returner, you don't have to always worry about like, well, how does that affect in the offense? When you had that with Isaiah Pacheco and Tyreek Hill and Kadarius Toney. Aaron talked to Washington in the locker room last week, and he had said, I enjoy everything about it. I'm just playing my role. My role is to be return man. He can do that. Being a punt returner, you're the spark. start the offense, you've got to be a spark when you go back there. So just the fact that I was able to get the guys excited and get ready to make plays, that's my job. That's all I wanted to do. I don't know. That's like the vibe of the Dante and Devin Hester, and you could tell like this is a real specialty for him. It's not just a Sky Moore receiver playing returner or a running back playing kick returner. You can see that he has some of the traits that you would look for in the prototypical guy, and I think that's a nice little weapon for the Chiefs. And it gets sweeter in the fact that he was a former Denver Bronco, right? That's a cool part of it as well.
Yeah, got his experience, initial experience in the NFL playing for a different team. How nice is that?
Well, the AFC West is what is the point I'm making here now.
Yeah, well, right. But I mean, we're not having to put up with rookie mistakes on this kid because he's already been in a position to make some, and they were for another team. How cool is that? I love that.
And previous experience in the NFL. All right. Any snap count takeaways that we should be focusing on before we close this thing out?
Yeah, I've actually started writing it today, which I haven't usually been doing on Editor's Show Day. So I have a few things that will be in the article. One of the things that I've tagged onto that I found most interesting, we finally had Kelsey up to a normal range of use, as I like to say, on Sunday after his injury in week 1. He was just short of 80%, and that's the range where he's normally at, about 80% of the snaps. And then he had, he had 6 passes on 9 targets, which is right on target for what he did last year. He averaged 8.9 targets and 6.4 catches through 2022's games. But in those games, he averaged 78 yards a game. And he's only at 155 for 4 games now because he, missed a game and was a limited participant in the next 2. But he's still in a position where if he can average at least 65 yards a game, which is not that big a deal for Kelsey, he can make it to his 8th straight 1,000-yard season. So I thought that was an interesting thing that I saw. And let's see what else. The wide receiver thing is
he better get to 1,000 yards for Taylor's sake, because
well, that's right. Oh well,
that correlation will be made immediately. Anyway.
Yeah. Also, I think we can conclude that the wide receiver situation is a mess. I think folks already have a sense that that's the case. But the numbers, and now that we're 4 weeks into the season, we can, put up our fancy charts and graphs and show how players are trending. And it really just kind of looks like spaghetti at this point. So,
yeah.
But you may already know that.
I would continue to argue for Rashee Rice, similar to how I feel about getting Pacheco going. I just think he's the best option in the room right now. And maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I know he had the drop too. I'm not just ignoring that. And the drop, it's teetering along the lines of an issue right now, but I just think he's the next best option consistently after Kelsey. Like, if maybe what they need to do is have him drop one in pregame, and then you target him right when the game begins. And I don't know, you go with Rice. I like Rice. I know that he's a rookie and that's a whole thing with Andy, but I just would like to see more of him at the beginning of the game.
Well, in terms of, I'm talking strictly in terms of use here. How many snap counts are they seeing?
Yeah.
And he actually was up at a pretty decent number, but not at a number you would normally see a starter play.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that's why I'm not putting him up there on the basis of usage. But in terms of production, right now he's the Chiefs' leading receiver with 140 yards on 13 receptions. And 19 targets, a catch rate of 68% isn't the best, but it ain't 50%. It ain't 46%, that Sky Moore is at 46% right now. So, I'm not, drops are always tough for me because people get themselves worked up about it. And they see them, and then they think they see more of them than there really are, and I think that's kind of happening with Rice. That yes, he's dropped a few balls, but if you look at what the numbers tell you, he's actually doing pretty good. And I think you're right that right now he's showing as much as anybody in terms of potential among the wide receivers.
Yeah, and he's got that trust of Mahomes. I mean, I understand
Yeah.
also like just the idea of he's dropping the football, but to me, I don't know. Just from I hate to use the term eye test, but from an eye test standpoint, he looks like he has the best possible chance set of tools to replace what the Chiefs really had in Juju. And not to say that the Chiefs miss the actual Juju, because it really hasn't gone all that well in New England. But I just think they miss that. They miss the idea of him, John, as they would say in relationship.
Right.
And so you need,
I agree.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you look from a PFF standpoint, in 4 games, the number 1 offensive rating is Patrick Mahomes with an 82. Number 2 on the team, Rashee Rice with the 79, followed by Pacheco and Travis Kelce. So that's just a little glimpse. These numbers aren't perfect, and I always only bring up PFF when it helps to prove my point.
Well,
all right,
of course.
John.
That's what you're supposed to do. Didn't you know that? Nobody told you?
We got a barn burner this weekend. The 3-1 Chiefs visiting US Bank Stadium, 1-3 Minnesota Vikings, 3:25 p.m. local time. Thank God it's not at night. We don't like night games, and it's all about us, as you know. John, what are the opening odds for this game?
5.5 point favorites. That's what the Chiefs are in this game, which I
would say that's low again.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But how can you say that with any confidence after the 3-point win over the Jets?
Right. Well, and that's what I always try when I write that up every week to give you an idea of what the trends are, what the other team has done in comparison to the spread over the last couple of weeks. And then, of course, what the Chiefs have done in comparison to the spread. And, the Chiefs don't always do well against the spread. And
never.
If you're the guy who's setting that thing out there in Las Vegas land, you'd probably be a little afraid of giving the Chiefs a 7 or 8 point spread on this game. So I can't say that I'm all that surprised. And frankly, I'm surprised the Vikings are where they are. I thought they'd be in much better shape at this point of the season. And I think they're in a position they could actually end up being a pretty good team, but they've had a really bad start. So we'll see.
A quick look at the Vikings to this point, just to kind of update you as we take our initial look at the next game. Lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I actually think the Bucs are better than people realize. Baker Mayfield is throwing the ball a little bit faster this year, and not to say that he's going to be one of these top 15 quarterbacks, but he's not doing as much as I thought he might have to allow the Bucs to lose football games, and so they were able to pull one out against the Minnesota Vikings. They got the Philadelphia Eagles. The next game lost to 34-28. They lost to the LA Chargers in a 0-3 versus 0-3 game. And they ended up going 0-3, and the Chargers improved to 1-2 in that game. And John, yesterday they almost lost to the Carolina Panthers. That would have been a really bad loss to go to 0-4. The Panthers were up 10-0 in this game, and then the Vikings were able to get a defensive touchdown, followed by Justin Jefferson, who is one of the best players in the game, and so they were able to finally pull out their first win of the season, 21-13. So, very much a team that is almost has the playoffs started to an extent already. They need to really not lose too many more football games.
Right.
And a team that has a lot of weapons. The Chiefs secondary is certainly going to be tested here. We'll see what the Chiefs can do as far as rebounding from a shaky offensive effort against the New York Jets. But that is a show. We went through our Marinated takeaways, Andy Reid, the whole kit and caboodle. If you want to join Arrowhead Pride Premier, we still have that link at the top of our website, just a premium option. We have a monthly option. We have a annual option. There is a 7-day free trial that goes along with it. John contributes. I'm in every newsletter, kind of giving you some bonus information as we get ready for each and every game for these Kansas City Chiefs. If you like the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network, we've asked you to leave a rating and a review on Apple iTunes. I will read it on the show. We'll restart the Arrowhead Pride Report tomorrow, the regular schedule of shows, including our famous Swiftie, Brad Simcox. He'll be joining you guys this week for the Great British Chief Show. But for Steve Serta and for John Dixon, my name is Pete Sweeney. Thank you for joining us on another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show.